Chapter 21. Ignoring the pain licking up my side, I stepped into my wedding dress. Though the pain had gotten better after I had rested, it hadn't gone away completely, and I had felt the pangs several times the following day as well. It had taken all my energy to keep my face from showing the pain, but I had kept the information to myself because I didn't want anything to ruin the wedding. My mother zipped up the dress and smiled at me in the mirror over my shoulder. "I know this isn't the wedding you dreamed of, but I think it will be the marriage you desired." She was right. As a little girl, I had always dreamed of the perfect dress, some big designer name, and a big wedding, but I'd almost had that with Daniel, and it hadn't turned out well. As I gazed at my reflection, I realized my dreams had also changed. Even if I hadn't been nearly 9 months pregnant, I would have opted for a simple dress, similar to the one that hugged my frame, and a small, intimate gathering like the crowd waiting in the sanctuary. In fact, other than the pangs in my side, it was nearly the perfect day. "I think you're right, Mom. I can't imagine a man better than JD." As the words left my mouth, tiny black flecks dotted my vision, and I shook my head to clear them. Worry etched itself on my mother's face. "Are you all right?" "Yeah, I think I just need to sit down for a minute." She led me to one of the chairs in the room and helped me sit down. I forced a smile, hoping to ease the lines on my mother's face. "Can you get me some water, Mom?" Her eyes bore into mine, as if trying to decide if she could leave me alone. With a lingering glance, she nodded and exited the room. Exhaling, I dropped my head back. The pain was getting worse. And now, with the black dots, I knew something was wrong. If I could make it through the ceremony, I'd have JD drive me straight to the hospital afterwards. But I had to make it through the ceremony first. "Lord, please help me get through the ceremony." A few calming breaths while my hands rubbed rhythmic circles across my belly helped ease the pain, and when my mother returned with the water, I felt better. Lexi and Tina filed in behind my mother, looking beautiful in their rose-pink dresses. JD had picked Scott as his best man, and because he wasn't close to anyone else here yet, he had asked Tina's husband to be the second groomsman. "It's almost time. Are you ready?" Lexi bounced from one foot to the other, barely able to contain her excitement. Her blonde hair was pulled up on her head with just a few tendrils hanging down. "More importantly, are you feeling better?" my mother asked. "Better? What's wrong?" Tina stepped forward, assuming her own mothering role. "Nothing. I just felt a little dizzy, is all." Tina's stare now mirrored my mother's. Only Lexi, who had never been pregnant, seemed oblivious to the mood in the room. "I'm fine, really." I pushed myself up, determined not to grimace or pass out. The little spots still swam in my vision, but I blinked them away. "Callie, maybe you should get checked out first." "No," I interrupted Tina more forcefully than I meant to. "I mean, I will, but after the ceremony, please?" My pleading eyes must have convinced them, because Tina and my mother sighed but agreed. Lexi handed me my bouquet, and we headed down the hallway. As my father was no longer in the picture, I had asked my mother to walk me down the aisle. Scott and Gary, Tina's husband, met us outside the sanctuary doors, looking dapper in their dress jackets and soft pink ties. "You look beautiful, Callie," Scott said, and Gary nodded his agreement, though his eyes were focused on his wife. The music began, and we all took a collective breath. Gary held out his arm, and Tina slipped hers inside, flashing one more worried smile at me before opening the door and beginning her walk down the aisle. Scott held out his arm to Lexi, who smiled and flashed me a wink. As the doors closed behind them, I turned to my mother. "Thank you, Mom, for always sticking with me, and for continuing to pray for me even when I didn't want it." My mother sniffed and wiped away the tear that had escaped from her eye. "Of course, dear. That is what mothers do. I'm sure you will do the same for Hope." Hope fluttered at the mention of her name, and I placed a hand on my stomach to calm her. Another wave of dizziness washed over me, and I closed my eyes briefly, hoping my mother wouldn't notice. The music started, and my mother held the door open. I searched for JD and his calming presence. If I could just make it down to the end of the aisle. Glad from my mother's arm that lent extra strength, I focused on putting one foot in front of the other. The black dots were returning, making it difficult to keep my eyes locked on JD, but my feet kept moving, and I made it to JD's side. He took my arm, and I sensed the concern in his eyes. Forcing a tight smile, though the pain was now licking at my lower back almost constantly, I took the last few steps to stand before Pastor Tony with him. "Dearly beloved," Pastor Tony started, "we are gathered here today to celebrate this man and this woman and their union with and before God. The marriage of one man to one woman is sacred to God. He designed us not to be alone, but to share our life with someone. JD and Callie found each other and have decided to share the rest of their life together. They have written vows they would now like to share with you. JD?" JD took my hand and stared into my eyes. "Callie, I've loved you from the moment I first met you. Even after we lost touch the first time, I never stopped thinking about you, and I prayed that we would meet again. I thought when you came into my life again it was the happiest day of my life. But I was wrong. This is the happiest day of my life, being here with you and all of our friends, and I promise to love you and only you for as long as we both shall live." He reached behind him and picked up the ring Scott held out, placing it back on my hand, its rightful place. Gazing at JD, I smiled, and summoning all the strength I could to make my voice even and clear, I repeated the words I had memorized a few days ago. "JD, I met you at one of the lowest points of my life, and you saw me at my worst and still cared about me. You taught me about God's love, even though I didn't believe you at first, but you never gave up on me. I knew when we crossed paths again that I loved you, and I promised to love only you and never give up on you as long as we both live." Scott brought the pillow to me, and I slid the ring I had picked for JD onto his finger. "Jonathan Daniel Peterson," Pastor Tony began, "do you take Callie Marie Green as your wife to have and to hold, to love and to cherish, forsaking all others till death do you part?" "I do." JD's hand holding mine sent strength down my arms. "Callie Marie Green, do you take Jonathan Daniel Peterson as your husband, to have and to hold, to love and to cherish, forsaking all others till death do you part?" "I do." The words came out barely more than a whisper as another stream of pain coursed up my back and exploded in my head. "Then by the honor vested in me by the great state of Texas with the Lord above, I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss the bride." JD wrapped his arms around me and placed his lips to mine. I could hear the crowd clapping, but the pounding in my head overshadowed it, and I sagged against his strong arms. "Callie, what's wrong?" JD's voice, full of fear, cut through the noise in my head just briefly. "I think I gasped, and then slipped out of his grasp and fell to the floor. The pain that was happening now couldn't be Braxton Hicks. It licked up my left side, and the spots returned with a vengeance, dancing intricate maneuvers in my vision. A pounding in my head stirred nausea, causing me to grab my stomach. A collective gasp rippled through the audience, followed by a hushed murmur. The people on stage all dropped to my side. "Someone call 911!" JD brushed my hair back and cradled my head. I concentrated on breathing and whispering a prayer that hope was okay. I hadn't fallen directly on my side, but I knew any fall while pregnant could be bad. Moments later, 2 EMTs rushed in carrying a stretcher. "Can you tell us your name, ma'am?" "Callie Green. No, sorry, Peterson." I smiled up at JD as the paramedic took my blood pressure and shined something in my eye. "So, Callie, what happened here?" The paramedic's blonde face appeared again. She appeared close to my age. "I've been having some pain and spots in my vision." "Spots? You didn't mention spots," my mother said. Her voice was a mixture of fear and admonishment. "Sorry, they come and go, but after the headache they got pretty bad, and I think that's when I collapsed." "There's a headache now, too?" Tina's concerned voice joined in. "Well, I think you should have come in earlier," the paramedic said, "but you've earned yourself a trip to the hospital." "At least we're married now, right, Pastor Tony?" "Don't worry, Callie. It's official. I have the paper right here." "Oh, good. I made it through the ceremony." The EMTs rolled me onto the stiff board and strapped my arms, legs, and head down. I tried not to focus on all the terrified faces above me. I hadn't meant to scare everyone. "I'm coming with her," JD said to the paramedics as they began to haul me down the aisle. "Just one in the ambulance," the blonde said. "The others will have to drive themselves." "We can take the church van. I'll drive." The inside of the ambulance was bright and silver. A too bright light above my face kept my eyes blinking. JD's face came into view for a moment as he climbed in and then disappeared as he sat down. but I could feel his hand holding mine. The other EMT, also a woman, but with dark hair pulled back in a severe ponytail, hovered over my face, attaching and buckling things I couldn't see. She didn't talk much, and I wish the blonde were back here instead. She seemed calmer. My eyes closed as the ambulance roared to life and the siren began to wail. The sound was too loud, but I had no way to cover my ears with my arms strapped to my side. Instead, I focused on sending words to heaven, words of supplication and hopes of healing and relief. When the ambulance stopped, the back doors flew open and the gurney was pulled down. I was now on a bed with wheels, and the world began to whiz by as the hospital doors opened. The EMTs rattled off my name and age and then some medical jargon I did not comprehend. A doctor with kind blue eyes appeared, older looking, but maybe that was from the stress of the job. His dark hair was streaked with gray. "Hi, Callie. I'm Dr. Rhodes. We're going to take good care of you." I smiled, and then the pain flared again, and the world went dark. When my eyes opened again, I was no longer on the hard gurney, but a softer hospital bed instead. My wedding dress had been replaced with a faded blue hospital gown. I hoped they hadn't had to cut it off. An IV tube ran from my left arm to a silver rod holding a clear liquid bag. Some sort of monitoring device was attached to my pointer finger, and there was some weird belt around my belly. A steady beeping and the sound of something scratching on paper filled the room. There was a small couch and a few chairs in the room, but they were empty. Where had everyone gone? A moment later, the door opened and JD entered carrying a tray of food. "Oh, thank goodness you're awake," he said, rushing to my side. He set the tray on a side table and leaned over to kiss me. "How long have I been out?" "A few hours. The doctors ran some tests and we're waiting on the results, but they think you passed out from the pain." "How is the pain now?" I took a deep breath and closed my eyes, searching for the pain, but couldn't feel any. "I don't feel any now." "They gave you some painkiller," he said. "It must be helping." "Where is everyone else?" "In the lobby. They're only allowing me in until they figure out what's wrong with you." The door opened again and Dr. Rhodes entered, carrying a clipboard. "Ah, good. You're awake. How are you feeling?" "Good for now. Did you find out what's wrong with me?" His smile straightened and his face grew serious. "Yes, we did. You have a bad case of preeclampsia. The pain in both your side, and your head as well as the vision spots, are telltale signs. Plus your blood pressure is extremely high." A knife of fear inserted itself and began to twist. "What does that mean?" "Well, in some cases it would mean that we keep you here and monitor you, but in your case I fear a seizure. I want to deliver the baby right away." "But she's not 40 weeks yet." He nodded. "I know, she's only 35 weeks, but Callie, if we wait and you have a seizure, it could cause you lasting damage." "Will she be okay at 35 weeks? Is she fully developed?" "Her lungs may still be weak. We'll give you some steroids to help develop her lungs, and I'll schedule a C-section for 2 days from now. That will give her lungs time to develop. We'll also start you on some anti-seizure medication, but I have to warn you that while it's generally effective, seizures can still happen. The sooner we deliver, the better your chances." I nodded, trying to abate the fear running rampant through me now, not only for myself, but for my daughter. There was one more thing I needed to know, though. Did I make it worse by not coming in at the first sign? Dr. Rhodes shook his head. "It's hard to say. Your blood pressure might have been a little lower then, and we might have been able to get you on medication sooner, but you still probably would have been confined to hospital bed rest so we could monitor you. If you had had a seizure during that time, then yes, it would have been worse. But since you didn't, my guess is that the 2 days didn't make much difference." Relief flooded my veins and weakened the dam that had been holding back the tears, threatening to spill down my cheeks. "But," he continued, "the next time you have symptoms like that, don't wait, okay?" Emotion constricted my throat, choking off words, so I nodded. As the doctor left the room, the dam exploded and a sob escaped. My shoulders began to shake as more sobs racked my body and the tears flowed freely. "Hey, it's okay," JD said, his hand caressing my hair. He leaned down and kissed my forehead, sending waves of comfort over me. "I'm so sorry. I felt like something bad was going to happen, and I wanted to make sure that you were Hope's legal guardian if anything happened to me." His green eyes clouded with emotion. "Callie, we could have figured something else out. Please don't keep me in the dark like that again." "I promise." As he watched her eyes close, his thoughts returned to a time years before with Alexa. She too hadn't told him when she had first gotten sick, and by the time she did, he could do nothing but hold her hand and watch her die. He couldn't bear to do that again. When he was sure Callie was asleep again, he stood and stretched. He needed to update everyone in the hall. He opened the door as quietly as he could and found Dr. Rhodes waiting for him on the other side. "I'm glad I caught you. I need a word." His words were solemn and heavy, like a lead balloon. Fear gripped JD, its icy talons shooting down his shoulders. His knees buckled and he stumbled back, sagging against the wall. "How bad is it?" The words felt like fire in his mouth. "Worse than I let on," Dr. Rhodes said, "but I needed to calm her down. Stress will only make it worse. She needs to deliver, but in her condition the risks are much higher." "What can we do?" "Unfortunately, not much. We have to let the steroids take effect or we risk losing the baby. But the longer we wait, the more we risk losing Callie. If you're a religious man, I'd say pray." JD felt like he'd been sucker punched in the gut. He couldn't lose Callie, not after finally finding her and making her his wife. He thanked the doctor, took another moment to compose himself, and then continued to the waiting room. A voice inside told him not to tell everyone the news the doctor had just shared. He needed them to be positive for Callie. For now, only Scott and Pastor Tony would be informed. Perhaps they could help him figure out what to do next. Every head looked up when JD entered. He hadn't expected so many, but nearly everyone from the wedding was there, along with several members of the church. "Callie's sleeping right now, but when she wakes, we can take turns visiting her. She has preeclampsia, so they want her to stay positive and avoid stress. They're giving her steroids to help develop Hope's lungs, and then they'll perform a C-section. It would be amazing if you all could be praying for peace and for her safety." As the group began to pair up and bow their heads, JD approached Melanie, whose skin had paled. Her hand covered her mouth, and he could tell she was holding back tears. "Will you go sit with her? I need to talk to Tony, and I'd like someone there with her in case she wakes up." Melanie's eyes bore into his own. "What aren't you telling me?" "I promise I'll tell you later. But for now, will you trust me?" It took another long look, but finally she stood and walked toward Callie's room. JD moved on to Scott and motioned for Tony to join them. The three stepped to the far corner, out of hearing range of the others in the room. "It's not good," JD said. "I'm not sure what else to do, but the doctor said to pray." "Of course, I'll get Sandra right on calling our members," Tony said. "I'll also call the other pastors I know and spread the word to their prayer teams." "What can I do?" Scott asked. "I'll be in the room most of the time," JD said. "Can you relay information to people here or wherever they're gathered?" Scott nodded in agreement, and Pastor Tony led the three of them in prayer for Callie and Hope. Callie was still sleeping when JD returned to the room. Melanie rose and crossed to him. The question still brimmed in her eyes, but JD couldn't tell her yet. "Melanie, can you go to Callie's apartment and get some things?" He thought for a moment of all they might need. The diaper bag, for one. It's packed and in Hope's room. Maybe some clothes for Callie for when, he corrected himself, she comes home. Toothbrush, toothpaste, and her Bible. I know she'll want that. "Okay," Melanie agreed. And though he could tell she wanted more details, she didn't ask, and JD was grateful. He sat in the chair Melanie had scooted close to the bed and grasped Callie's hand. His eyes closed against the emotions battering to be released, and he sent up another stream of prayers. He hated feeling helpless, but he knew that the only thing he could do was to pray for Callie, unceasingly.